So welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here for our Safe at School Back to School webinar. And I'm delighted to be here hosting today. This webinar is presented to you by the American Diabetes Association. And my name is Nicole Johnson. I am ADA's Vice President of Operations in the Science and Healthcare Division. I also live with type 1 diabetes and am a dedicated diabetes advocate. And so I'm particularly honored to be here helping to shepherd this program along today. As you probably know, the ADA's Safe at School program is devoted to protecting the legal rights of students with diabetes, so these students may learn and thrive in a safe and healthy school environment and be treated fairly. And today, our panelists are school nurses from Colorado, Montana, and Virginia, and they are here to share their best practice insights, along with providing recommendations and tips for preparing for the return of students with diabetes this school year. It's such an exciting time, but also can be stressful for those young people and their families. Our hope today is that the panel discussion will provide school nurses with increased knowledge, skill, and confidence to best support students with diabetes and to enable these students to optimize their education and have the ability to safely participate in all school-sponsored opportunities. So this morning, our co-presenters, they're going to share expertise and tips on topics such as field trips, parental input to insulin dosing, CGM or continuous glucose monitoring, and the important role of the school nurse as an advocate and the key provider and coordinator of diabetes care in the school setting. School nurses, parents, providers, and students working together, we can all make sure our children with diabetes are safe at school. So I bet you've been to webinars like this before, but just in case, we want to make sure that you know some of the specifics. So please be sure to type any questions that you may have in the chat box. Our panel members will do their best to answer your questions at the end of our discussion, and I will also be monitoring those along with other members of the ADA team. This program is also being recorded and will be available soon for viewing on the ADA's website and on our various social media platforms. So finally, we want to make sure to acknowledge that the information provided by this program does not constitute legal or medical advice. So if you are seeking medical or legal advice, please seek out your medical provider or attorney. So thank you so much to our panelists and to all of you for attending today. I'd like to introduce you to these folks who are our experts here. And what we'll do is we'll go around and have each panelist give a short introduction of herself. So let's start with Sandy Barrett.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sandy Barrett and I'm a public health nursing supervisor and also the lead diabetes educator for our staff. I work in Arlington, Virginia, and where I work, our county's public health division staffs the school clinics for our county's public school system and also creates the school health policies, procedures, and protocols. And here in Arlington, we have 28,000 students in 37 schools. And our setup for our clinics is we have a school health aide in every clinic. And then we also have a school nurse who covers either 1 to 2 schools. And in Virginia, our code requires that in addition to our nurses and school health aides being trained in the management of diabetes in schools, any school that has 1 or more students with diabetes must identify at least 2 school staff members to be fully trained in care of these students as well. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Sandy. Up next, Annie Engelman.
Hello all. I also go by Ruth Ann Engelman. I've been a nurse in pediatrics for almost 20 years. I've been a school nurse for 10 years, and I have worked closely with diabetics for quite a long time. I'm part of the Colorado Diabetes Resource Nurse Group, which is a kind of a cool entity where statewide we all get together from different districts and talk about case studies and how we can best support our diabetic students in the school setting. I work for Boulder Valley Schools at the moment, along with my colleague on here, Carrie Lee.
Well, that's a good segue. Carrie Lee, how about you go next?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Lee. I work for Boulder Valley School District, like Annie said. I am the health services coordinator with Boulder Valley and also a diabetes resource nurse. So as a health services coordinator, I'm that resource for our nurses, kind of supervisory on the clinical aspect. And as a diabetes resource nurse, I serve as that expertise for Boulder Valley and being a resource for our nurses in the care of our students with diabetes. I'm also the president of the Diabetes Resource Nurse Group of Colorado. And so, like Annie said, this is a group that we distinguish a nurse in every district, hopefully, that can be a resource for all of our nurses within Colorado that serves students with diabetes.
Erica Harp, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. I'm Erica Harp. I'm the lead nurse with Great Falls Public Schools in Great Falls, Montana. I've been in this position for about 12 years. When I started, there were 4 part-time nurses caring for the over 10,000 students we have in our district. And now I oversee the 20 other nurses in our district, and we have a 1 school nurse per building model. So I have worked with various forms of the delivery of care model within that district in the 12 times, so I can kind of speak to that. I've also participated with our Montana Association of School Nurses in a committee that worked with the Board of Nursing to revise some of our delegation rules so that we could better care for some of our students with diabetes. I've worked with the Montana Kids with Diabetes Collaborative. I'm a past president of the Montana Association of School Nurses and the current director representing Montana to the NASN Board of Directors.
Wow. We have Jacqueline McManaman.
Hey there, I'm Jackie McManaman, and I am a nurse manager as well as a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And I work in Fairfax County Health Department. Similar to my neighbor, Sandy, here in Fairfax, we also have the public health model. So we, as a health department, provide school health services to the public school system here in Fairfax. We are the largest county in Virginia with 188,000 students, and we have 200 school locations. So we're a great big county. We have school health aides in all of our schools, as well as public health nurses who provide those health services to our students in school. I'm also a member of the ADA's, a volunteer of the ADA Safe at School work group, and I chair the schools committee for the Virginia Diabetes Council. So that's me. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. And our last panelist is Corey Wellenstein.
Hi, my name is Corey Wellenstein. I am a school nurse in Helena, Montana for the Helena Public Schools. Our model, I'm really envious of all of the other models I'm hearing about. Ours is kind of, there's 8 nurses for 8,000 students. Each nurse has 2 schools. I have 2 elementary schools with about a total of 900 students. And I am the sole nurse for that. I don't have diabetic educators and all of that support, so I'm really envious of that. But because of that, I feel pretty experienced in all of the little nuances of being a school nurse and how critical it is for students with diabetes. They consume a huge part of my day. I have been a nurse for 30 years. I've been a school nurse for 5, and I love it.
Well, we are so grateful that all of you are taking time out of your day to join us and share your expertise and your lessons learned in the trenches. Thank you, though, first and foremost, thank you for what you do for students who live with diabetes and their families who are worried about them and seeking support. So I want to start at the beginning and define a little bit about the role of the nurse. And Erica, I'm going to come to you first with this first key question. So what is the key role of the school nurse in supporting students with diabetes?
Well, Nicole, I think you actually set this up wonderful in your introduction because you identify that the school nurse is the care coordinator and really the main advocate for these students. I think in school nursing, our number one role for all of our students is advocacy, and especially being the person in the building who has the knowledge and understanding of type 1 diabetes and that can appreciate that every student with type 1 diabetes is unique. Makes them set up to be the true advocate for these students and kind of the hub in the wheel of care coordination. They have to look at the student and the school comprehensively within the school day, look at their needs now, what their needs might be in the future, and create their plan of care accordingly in conjunction with the diabetic medical management plan. We all know at the beginning, it's a lot of making sure we have all the paperwork, but then after all that paperwork, I think we really have to look at the student, the family, the whole educational setting to figure out how we can ensure that they are healthy, safe, and ready to learn within the school day. When sometimes that also means we're looking before and after school to make sure that everybody is on board in addressing the students' needs and anticipating how we're going to help them grow in their independence, or just ensuring that they're set up for success in all ways possible.
Oh, that is so heartwarming, ensuring that they have the independence to grow. I just love that. And we're going to dive into that a little deeper as the hour goes on. But Sandy, I'm wondering if you can answer this next question. What is the process for making sure a student with diabetes receives diabetes care on the first day of school?
Yep, absolutely. And we really want these kids to be ready to get the care they need on that very first day. So first of all, we really need to be aware that the student even exists. So we typically learn about them from their school health entry forms, or because the parent notifies us about the student, or because they're a returning student. So once we become aware of the student with diabetes, we want to enter this information into our student information system. And here in Arlington, we use Synergy, but I know there's a lot of different systems out there, but we just want it in there so that the school teachers and staff that are going to be working with these kids are aware of them. And then well before school starts, and I would say at least a month or so before school starts, our school nurses connect with the parents of any students with diabetes in their schools. And at that point, they're going to have a conversation about the care that we provide to the students with diabetes, just so the parents have a really clear expectation. And this really goes a long way to help them feel more comfortable, because we know that it's got to be very, very stressful for a parent to send their student with diabetes to school. And then we also have a welcome letter that we have drafted that we send out to all of our new families of students with diabetes that talks about this care that we provide, and also the things that they will need to do, because some of the responsibility certainly falls on the family. We provide them with a copy of the ADA's DMMP, and we also provide them with a list of the supplies that they're going to need to provide to the clinic. And really during this time, this initial conversation, we're really stressing the importance of really good communication. We exchange contact information and so on. And then during this, initial conversation, we set up a time to meet before school starts. And this is really something I can't stress enough as being important, because, we don't want the family showing up on that first day of school with the forms and wanting us to go over everything, because that is such a crazy day. And also, we don't even want them showing up at that open house, if you have one, because other people are coming in and dropping off medication. So we want to try and set a really specific time that we will not have any other interference going on. And we want them to bring their kid with them at that time so that we can meet the student. We can go over the clinic, the flow of how the day will look, get their DMMP, and very importantly, we go through their DMMP with them, get their supplies, and we want to also make sure we know how to use the CGM or pump brand that student is using if they have that. And then finally, before school start, we also meet with the student's teachers. So really any teacher who will be working with that student, and we provide them with basic training on what they will need to know about their students with diabetes, things like what highs might look like, what lows might look like, and so on. So by doing all of these things, we really have that student and the clinic well prepared to take care of that student on the first day of school.
Oh, the keys I heard from that wonderful answer are communication, early preparation, and then you foreshadowed this next question. You mentioned the DMMP. And so, Jackie, I'm wondering if you can go into a little more detail for us on what is a diabetes medical management plan? How is that used by the school to provide diabetes care?
Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. Thank you. So the Diabetes Medical Management Plan, which we call the DMMP, is essentially a doctor's order. So this order provides the diabetes care instructions for the student with diabetes. And the American Diabetes Association recently updated in 2022 the DMMP using a multidisciplinary team of diabetes experts. And what I'll do is, as soon as I finish with my question, I'm going to post the DMMP to the chat for those of you who haven't seen it. But this document it's so comprehensive. It's a fillable form that the schools can use, that's completed in collaboration by the parents, the student, and the pediatric diabetes healthcare providers. It allows for a standardized completion of the form and efficient for the providers to be able to complete it. But beyond that, it also allows prescribers to tailor the care instructions specifically for that student. So that provides greater clarity for those caring for the student, so the end user being the school nurse or the school staff members. The form does have a broad spectrum of the diabetes therapies available, so fixed dose regimens, basal bolus, automated insulin systems available on the form, so to be customized for that student. And I think one of the biggest highlights is that it allows for collaboration. So there are sections, so 5 sections on the form that the parent actually completes. And then the remaining sections, the remaining 4 sections, are completed by the healthcare provider. And so to Sandy's point of scheduling that meeting with your school nurse, the parent should schedule the meeting with the school nurse, and you can go through those sections, especially those points completed by the parent, and do them together and kind of walk through them. So how is this used by the school? The form drives the care that we give to the students in the school. So it outlines those hypoglycemia guidelines, hyperglycemia, pump guidance, how to handle physical activity, sports, as well as the student's current insulin regimen, just to name a few of the sections. So it really is that all-in-one document, although it is 6 pages, so it's pretty long, but all-in-one document to be able to take care of that student with diabetes in the school setting. So thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, such a key element in ensuring that students are healthy, safe, and that everyone is informed about the unique aspects of their diabetes. We know that there are a range of students from those who are small to those who are more independent. And Corey, I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about protocols that should be in place for those students who are more independent in the self-management of their diabetes.
Yes, so I work with elementary kids, so my goal is always to get them towards independence, but that is typically not realistic as far as their developmental ability and their age. But in talking with my peers who work with the high school age students, they contact the parents and the student, similar to what we were describing as far as what you do at the beginning of the school year to get organized and ready. And together we agree whether or not that student is truly independent. And if so, we've found a form on it's called Kids with Diabetes. It's on their website. that acknowledges it's essentially an agreement that the student will manage their diabetes, have the appropriate equipment with them every day, and designates where emergency equipment will be stored, either in their backpack, their locker, or in the health room, and parents acknowledging their responsibility and all of that. So ideally, we have a parent and student provide that form, and then the nurse signs that. In addition to that, we do ask for the DMMP as well for those situations when the student actually does need help. We have directions on how to help that student. There have been times when parents don't want to provide those things. Montana is kind of a rugged individualist state, and sometimes they don't want to provide those things. So if that's the case, we just carefully document that interaction. And we have, from the state health department, there is an algorithm for blood glucose, how to manage blood glucose results. And then we kind of follow that. And of course, reach out to parents if we have any issues whatsoever.
Thank you so much. No, that's incredibly helpful. As we're talking about parents, Carrie, I wonder if you'll jump in on this next one. How can parents best work with the school nurse to make sure that their child is healthy, safe, well supported at school, and that they have everything they need to take care of their diabetes and fully participate?
Thank you so much, Nicole. Like everybody has said before me, the key thing is that meeting, the reaching out to your school to identify who your school nurse is. The way that we make a year successful is being that team that works together, having your school nurse be that resource that's at school to provide that care during the day, and then having the parent still be a part of that team and that input. You are always seen as the expert, and so we always reach out to those parents first when we have questions or want some guidance. So that first interaction is key to really have that meeting, that sit down and talking through your DMMP, your health plan that's going to be in place at school, thinking through what are the situations that are going to happen in school. Is the child involved in activities that are going to need some special considerations? Are there athletics that we need to think about? What about PE and how do they react when they go to PE or when they go out to play at recess? Or how are we going to do when we eat at school? Some kids really like school lunch and some not so much. So thinking through those different situations. So it's really just a really thought out plan and sitting down and using all our resources to really come up with a thorough plan. And then when we identify that we know that someone's going to be involved with athletics, we're going to then identify those staff that need to be trained to provide that care for the student during those different activities. Or if during the school day, like we have seen throughout our panel, we all have different models where we work on a consultative model. So our health room paras are our full-on resources that take care of our kiddos. And we know that the staff are going to help as well. So it's just working and being that collaboration throughout the year to be able to provide that safe school environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this theme of communication and collaboration. It's just so very important. And we're going to keep touching on it throughout the coming questions. In fact, Annie, I think you're the only one that we haven't been to yet. So on this same theme of communication, what are some ways that the school nurse and parents can work together to establish routes of communication with the school-based health team?
I would say after all these years, I would say patience, planning ahead, and advocate. The school year is very busy for families. It's also very busy for doctors' offices, and of course for the school nurses. So the more that you think about it over the summer and try and get into the doctor, get your orders situated, make sure you have the medications that you need. That always is very helpful to come to the table. Ideally, a month ahead of time is wonderful, but even a week and a half can really be very, very helpful. In the back side of things, we are having to train teachers and coaches and a health para, lots of different people. So the sooner we have that information, the better. Being patient is a big part of that, is because all those things take time on your end and also time on the nurse's side of things. So if we don't have something for you instantly, just know that we are working on it and that we care very much. And then to go back with advocacy, if you are feeling like something isn't working well, like, you know, your kid is getting low a lot, or they're high frequently, or their teachers are being punitive, or something isn't right, or you feel like you aren't getting all the things that you need, speak up. A lot of people just simply don't know. So if you reach out to us and communicate with us about what you feel like you're not getting, more often than not, people are ready to respond and want to help you. And I would also encourage you to get to know your counselor at the school, especially in the middle school and the high school grades, because they help with the teacher management aspects and academics, and also the 504. So that goes back into the advocacy.
Such excellent recommendations. My goodness. But it is all a partnership and we all have the same goal. We want the student to succeed, right? That's what I'm hearing coming from your hearts. And it's so beautiful. We've got a bunch of questions and I see we've got lots of accolades hitting the chat box. Thanks for everybody that's putting things in there. And I have noticed our panelists are putting links in as well. But we're going to keep rolling through some questions because I have some of those that you've already listed in the chat box coming up here for this group. So Erica, I wonder if we can turn to you next. How does a school nurse identify and recruit non-clinical staff to be trained to help provide care to students with diabetes? Are there any special considerations that they need to take into account?
So I would say, once again, this is where the school nurse being part of the school environment is really helpful. We need to look at the students' daily schedule to first even establish their needs. By the time we get to the point where we're training somebody, we would have already had those meetings and assessed the student, established our health plan, our emergency care plans to kind of figure out what their needs are and who may be needed to help them. And so this again would be different depending on the age of the student. You're going to look at where they are during the day and what their level of assistance or care might be. And so if you're working with a student that's maybe closer to their date of diagnosis, not as independent, they might need more people available to assist them. Again, this is going to be different if there's a school nurse in the building versus not a school nurse in the building all day, every day. And so all of these things are taken into consideration. When we look at somebody to teach or train, it can be overwhelming in the fall because everybody is busy and everybody is learning something new. And so I think it is helpful to work with your building administrator because they might know people, staff a little bit better than you or know some different traits. We always want to look, especially in the elementary setting, at the teacher. They obviously are going to be with the student the most and may need more in-depth training or education, or maybe somebody you're delegating to if that's something that you're needing to do. You're always going to want to make sure that individuals that are with that student at during activities that might be high risk, like recess, PE, anything where they may be experiencing a hypoglycemic event. We want to make sure that they at least have a basic level of understanding that this student has type 1 diabetes. What does that mean? And what are signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia? And then I think it's up to the school nurse to decide who needs to be trained in those interventions for hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. So I do think that there is kind of a stratification of training, and you don't want everybody to be drinking from the fire hose that is trying to understand this chronic health condition. And so I think working with smaller groups of people to do more in-depth training, it has been more effective for us. The teachers are usually very receptive, but I do think I've had some staff that say, I'm not good in an emergency situation. You should not train me in an emergency. And that's really helpful because I know that they're not going to be the person I send for the glucagon or even an EpiPen or whatever the situation is. And so doing that part of assessing the individuals you're training to. And then I think you're also need to be open to them as a continual resource for them to come to and ask questions. I have been asked to go into other districts and provide training, and it's a little bit more nuanced then because I don't have the ability to provide oversight and follow up afterwards. And again, when we're doing trainings, understanding the difference when I was saying trainings versus delegation. So if I'm delegating a task, that's definitely something I really want to document, follow up with, and provide oversight with. And those are going to be more in-depth tasks, like it could be insulin injection, it could be working with a pump, checking a CGM, things like that, establishing those communication pathways with those people that you are training, and always recording the trainings you're providing, what you've provided in that training. I always have my administrators sign off just so that they acknowledge that I have a record that they've acknowledged who I've trained in the building. And then I would also, when you are providing training or delegating in the school setting, be mindful that that individual is protected under your district's errors and omissions liability. I just think that that is just something we can do to make sure that we're all on the same team and that everybody is going to be protected and that it is within the boundaries of their job description.
That's great advice. Thank you. Here's a specific question. Sandy, I wonder if you can help with this. When should a correction dose be given outside of meal times as per the student's DMMP?
Yeah, it's a great question. I find sometimes with staff, the focus is so much on the lows because, of that concern about that immediate emergency. But it is really important to note that when a student's glucose level is high, this impacts the way they feel, their ability to concentrate and learn, and it also increases their chances of developing diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, and particularly in that case for students that aren't quite so well controlled with their glucose. But as a result of these things, we know those things, giving a correction dose when glucose levels are high is important, but as long as it's appropriate based on that student's DMMP. So, of course, we follow the student's DMMP when providing hyperglycemic care because that is their individualized healthcare plan. So looking back, I know Jackie spoke about the DMMP and specifically the ADA's one, and there's a variety of them out there. I think the ADA's one is fabulous and really covers everything. But speaking specifically to that one, Section 9 talks about the treatment of hyperglycemia. And this section will give us information as school nurses on how to treat the highs outside of meal times. And it also gives us a number at which we're treating. So their default is 300, but again, these are individualized plans, so it can be anything, but typically around 300. And then Section 6A of the DMMP has a dosing schedule in which the healthcare provider tells us about the type of insulin the student receives, as well as the correction dose and the carb coverage throughout the day. And most of this chart deals with meal times, but there is a section, the very first line of the ADA's dosing chart includes information on when we can give a correction dose. And the default here is 3 hours. But again, can vary. So it will say if insulin has not been given within the last 3 hours and the student is at that high level, you can go ahead and correct with insulin. And the reason 3 hours is the norm is because most of the students are getting rapid acting insulins for their bolus dose, and their action time is about 3 hours, which means that majority of the insulin given will be out of their body, has done its work after that 3-hour period. So we're not in danger of stacking insulin. So if you have a student who is over 300 or whatever their default is, you want to first of all determine when they receive their last correction dose. And sometimes this may require a call home. If it's happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know the answer to that question. But sometimes it'll happen at 10 o'clock in the morning and they weren't in school at 7 o'clock. So you don't know what time they got that last dose. So you would want to check with a parent and find out when they got that last dose. And if it's been more than 3 hours or whatever that default time is, you would of course remember to assess for any symptoms of DKA, check for ketones if appropriate, and also give water as per the DMMP. And then of course, if you are giving that correction dose, you should be notifying the parent per the communication plan in the DMMP to let them know that correction dose was given. And that's particularly important if you're doing it later in the day, because you don't want, to give a dose at 2 o'clock o'clock, the child goes home at 3 o'clock and they're still a little bit high because that dose hasn't set in yet, and then the parent redose them and then put them in danger of going really low.
Such a good point. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for all of that information, Sandy. Jackie, I'm wondering if you can help us out. Does the school nurse usually play a role or participate in the 504 IEP process? And what role is that if they do participate?
Yeah, absolutely. The school nurse should be participating in that 504 or IEP process. And each school district does it a little bit differently, you know, how you go about requesting that. But certainly, you know, the IEP is an individualized education plan. And so this kind of falls under the special education house, you know, side of the school, if the student qualifies for that. And those accommodations related to diabetes, related to their diagnosis, can be rolled into the IEP. The 504 plan is for a student who doesn't qualify for an IEP, but does have a disability, which diabetes is recognized as a disability under Section 504. And these are those accommodations that the student will need so that they can participate and access their education in the same way as a student who doesn't have diabetes. So a 504 can be requested by any member of the school team. So whether it's the school nurse, whether it's the teacher, it can also be requested by the parent. Okay, so any member, the student can request it, but the school nurse should actually absolutely be a member of that knowledgeable committee, and is often looked to help provide the guidance around, you know, what accommodations are needed for that student with diabetes. Some typical accommodations that might come to mind are things like allowing the student unlimited access to the bathroom, to the health room, to snacks, to their supplies, you know, throughout the school day, allowing the student additional time for meals because of that extra visit to the health room that they may need to do, notifying parent or guardian in advance of class parties where snacks or treats will be served, giving them alternate arrangements if class time is missed related to being high or low, or medical appointments, or periods of hypo or hyper. Same with alternate arrangements for testing. So there's a lot of potential accommodations that are out there. ADA's website has a great list of, it's very extensive accommodations. There's some typical ones on the website, and then they actually have a 504 plan template that you as the school nurse can access and be thinking about. So I'll definitely post that into the chat so everyone can have that at their fingertips. And so when you're thinking about those accommodations, obviously you want to make them specific to your students, but the ADA website is a good place to start, especially if you've never had practice using those type of accommodations. But bottom line is, if the student doesn't have an IEP, every single student with diabetes should have a 504 plan, okay? If they have an IEP already, those 504 accommodations can be wrapped up into the IEP. If they don't have an IEP, they should have a 504. And you as the nurse can be the advocate to get that for the student.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you so much. That's wonderful information. And thank you for being willing to post that link in the chat, because that's going to be really helpful to so many people. Corey, I have a great question for you. Should students share information about their diabetes with other students? And if so, what's the most helpful information that might be shared?
Sorry. The first school nurse conference that I attended years ago, one of the presenters said, if you remember anything from my presentation, I want you to remember the phrase, "it depends." And I think diabetes is a prime example of it depends on so many different factors. So I love the idea of all the kids in the classroom, for that student to understand and know what diabetes is and how that affects that child. Some kids are super excited to share that information. I had one sweet little boy, for his school picture, he wanted to raise up his shirt to show people that he had a pump, and that was part of his school picture. So clearly he was proud of having diabetes and felt very comfortable with sharing that information. And then I have other students who are mortified that others will see them as different, or it's just very embarrassing for them. So I meet the student and the parents where they're at with that, but I do encourage them to understand that everyone is naturally curious anytime something is why a nurse is coming into the classroom or why a student is needing to go to the health room. So I encourage them to consider letting other people know just a bit about their diabetes, if not quite a bit. If the student is comfortable, I've had students and myself at the beginning of the school year just present their little story and give the students in their classroom very basic information about diabetes and the equipment that student specifically uses to manage their diabetes. Some students are more than willing to do that and others are not. And some kids, even though they want to, have a really hard time explaining. They're little. I have a first grader who loves to share things, but it's hard for him to explain a pretty complicated process such as diabetes. So I help them along with that. I've also used videos, kid-friendly videos that help explain diabetes to other children. One of the things I do like to focus on for when we do talk to students about their diabetes is what the classmates themselves can do to help that student, how they can be a good friend, what they can watch for with that student if that student is demonstrating symptoms of being too low, to speak up for them and to be a friend. I think that helps shift some of the focus off of the student and gives other kids, it's a great lesson for other kids to learn to care for other people. Sometimes I revisit the topic when a student is super shy at the beginning of the year. I do feel like as the year progresses, they feel more comfortable with what's going on and it's not so threatening when they have to interact with the school nurse in the classroom or scurrying to the health room. So I asked them again, I kind of keep checking in with them to see if they're feeling ready to share that information with others, because kids are just naturally curious. And I would rather the students in their peer group understand the basics and the facts rather than kind of come to their own conclusions. And sometimes that's a little, it scares them and they don't understand what's going on, and it actually can have a negative impact on the other students in the classroom, and I try to prevent that.
I love that you're exuding flexibility here to meet the student where they are and then to watch as they grow and develop and to assess their readiness. That's really so wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Carrie, what are reasonable expectations of school nurses and school staff in monitoring with continuous glucose monitors or CGMs?
Thank you. Well, this is a hot topic that's going in the chat. So this is, like Corey said, this is a depends, which I know is really, really hard. So in Colorado, as some have pointed out, we have the Colorado Kids with Diabetes website. And part of our work as diabetes resource nurses is we have a collaboration that works together, and we have a standards of care that tries to address a lot of these questions and tries to give guidance to our nurses. And as technology is getting so advanced and is so wonderful and has provided such great resources for our kids with diabetes or anybody with diabetes, it also has created a little more challenges, right? Because now we have this access where parents can remotely monitor and they will reach out. And so this then brings the question of, should our staff be monitoring and should our nurses have monitors to see the numbers continuously? And I'll say, it depends. We do know and we do present that school looks a little different. So as these kids come to school, our focus is not to sit there and watch their number. Our goal is for them to be very successful in the classroom. And so we try to really work with families and talk through those situations because it can be very difficult. It can be really hard and creates a lot of anxiety to kind of let some of that go. So we generally say this is not an expectation that we set up for our staff because we have this as a resource. So we know the student is going to be safe because that CGM does have alarms. But we do know situations may create a time where we may have to help assist monitoring. Say if we have little kids, our little preschoolers that can identify a low, we may have a tool that the staff can utilize to kind of identify if a low is coming up to keep them safe. You also have to think about your staff needs. In Colorado, we don't have a nurse in every school in all of our districts. And so then we have to think about our staff and keeping them protected within their situation of they have a lot of things going on. Not only are they providing this care, but they also are doing attendance or they're teaching or they're taking care of 600 kids in a school. And so to have this monitor sitting there can create a lot of stress, and that we don't want to do that to our staff either. There's also policy. It's looking at the policy of the districts or the schools and what is going to be allowed in or out. And so it's really working closely with your school staff on what's appropriate. But that's why we really try to bring forward that our CGMs have alarms, and they have alarms that we really want to be set as them being actionable. We don't want them informational, because we know that not only do kids get alarm fatigue, staff could too, if we have an alarm that's not set appropriately. And so we want those alarms to be there, as that's the time that we really want to check those CGM numbers and making sure that our kids are safe.
That's thank you. That's such important information. And Annie, I'm going to have you just carry on with the theme of CGMs, but more thinking about, do parents or guardians need to remotely monitor their child's CGM while at school? And how can the school nurse reassure parents and guardians that their child will be safe without constant CGM oversight?
I just want to say I get it from the parent's perspective. Like diabetes, when they get a low, it can be really, really scary. And you have this tool and you want to use it. But you have to remember that in the school setting, there are so many adults. The likelihood of your child ever truly being alone, I know, except when they're going to the bathroom, or maybe perhaps if they're walking down the hall, there are certain situations, but we do put in a lot of safeguards to be safe and mindful. You know, teachers are never supposed to send a student down who's low alone. They should be escorted or called down to the health room and say, hey, can you please come help bring Evan down? I think he may be low. We teach teachers and coaches, front office staff, secretaries, even a lot of the principals on how, like, what does a low blood sugar look like? If you have a kid who has diabetes and they're also vomiting and they seem confused, what does that mean? So people are really trained to respond and to know that, your diabetic child is a little bit more precarious than a different child who doesn't have diabetes. I really want to reassure parents that the schools have a lot of safety built in, and you got to let your kid go. Let them be a kid. They are more than just their diabetes. They are themselves. You got to let them go to school, let them learn and play and engage in school in a way that's not just about their number, but about their alarms. You have to relinquish a little bit of it and trust and hope that the schools know what they're doing, because we really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. And I get that anxiety and as well. My goodness. Jackie, on this theme of monitoring blood sugars and being a little specific, I want to ask you about insulin. Should parents be permitted to make insulin dose changes during the school day? Why is it important for parents to provide input to insulin dose adjustments? And how can the DMMP ensure that parents are able to provide the input that they need?
This is such a good question. Yes, and yes, but within reason. And I can explain that a little. The goal of diabetes education is to provide self-management education and training to the parent and eventually the student, so they can make those little tweaks here and there as needed. A student's insulin needs are constantly changing as the student grows, they develop, they enter puberty, they get sick. All are these factors that can influence your insulin sensitivity, as well as our busy lives, right? You have soccer practice, swim practice, dance, gymnastics. All of this can influence blood sugars and therefore insulin. And so a parent may need to change carb ratios on more active days to prevent lows. And the DMMP allows for this customization. Again, the ADA DMMP allows for this customization. So the DMMP has a dosing table on page 4 that gives the parent the parameters to make those adjustments, okay? And the healthcare provider completes those parameters. So for example, a parent may be given permission by the healthcare provider to adjust the carb ratio plus or minus 30 grams, or adjust the total insulin dose plus or minus 10 units. So this gives the parents the flexibility to make those adjustments to meet the ever-changing insulin needs of our students. And in our school district, we do need that in writing from the parent when they make those adjustments. And so a simple email, hey, today we need to do a 1:30 ratio. That's good enough as long as it's within those parameters. And so that's something that gives parents the ability to make those adjustments to meet the needs of their child, because we recognize how it can be ever changing. But it's also important to consider, as the school nurse, if a parent is requesting multiple interventions per school day to override or to change the DMMP or override a pump dose calculation, this is care that is beyond a reasonable accommodation due to the frequent interruptions to the child's education and the potential for error, right? If we're making a lot of changes, we could accidentally cause a hypoglycemic type of event. So persistent requests of this nature certainly would require a conversation between you, the school nurse, the parent, and the healthcare team to make sure that we're providing that safe care to the student without having an impact on their educational environment.
Oh, thank you. There's so much important information to cover, and I'm noticing we're running out of time. And so we pulled a couple of questions from the chat. Thank you to those who've been putting them in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a question and just one of the panelists take it, grab hold and give it an answer. We've got 3 or 4 that we'd love to hit in the next couple of minutes. So first up, does the DMMP vary by state?
I can take this one. It can vary by district. It's just the tool, but it's what I have found is it's really helpful if you have providers in your area that have buy-in to it. And so we had our Montana Kids with Diabetes Collaborative that established our DMMP in Montana. But when it came up for review, we really had to seek buy-in from providers within the state, so the endocrinologists that were seeing our students. So I do think that the DMMP from the American Diabetes Association is, if you don't have a DMMP, is your #1 starting place. And then if you do get feedback from the provider or providers that you're working with, maybe working in collaboration to establish something that meets the needs of everyone involved.
Okay, next question up. How does the school nurse safely oversee several schools?
I could speak to that. That's kind of our model that we do here in Colorado. We work on a consultative model. So in our district, our nurses typically have about 3 to 5 schools, depending on the caseload. And that can seem a little overwhelming, but because we, in our Colorado Nurse Practice Act, we have the delegation training and delegation model. And so how we work this is we do have health paras identified in each school, and they are our key resource. They are the person that we delegate the care to our students, depending on whether it's diabetes, seizures, we run the gamut. We can delegate all the way up to G-tubes, catheterizations, seizure care, just about everything. The only thing that we don't delegate is trait care in our school setting. So it's just you become this team member with our health paras, and you work as that team, and they're kind of your arm into the school. And it's a resource where we go in and work with them every week to every day, depending on what the needs are. And it's constant communication and constant supervision of the staff that's working there.
You know, piggybacking on that, is there, and this again is for anybody, is there a skills checklist for training school staff?
I know there's resources. Anybody else can jump in if you want to, but Colorado Kids with Diabetes has a bunch of them that we broke them down into tier training. We do tier training according to what the staff needs are. So I know we have a bunch of them. I know ADA also provides a lot of resources as far as different checklists and training opportunities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so check the website and check for those resources. There are some new glucagon products that are available. So let's touch on that one really quickly. What products are now available, and should staff be trained on using all glucagon products? Where do you stand?
And I'm happy to speak to that one. We are definitely seeing and actually encouraging moving away from that traditional glucagon kit, that red kit that we all know, only because, you know, our staff can use it. We're trained to it. But, you know, we do have kids going out on field trips and things like that. And pulling up the medication from a vial and a syringe can be tough. The two big products that we're seeing are Baqsimi and Gvoke, and they are both fabulous. Baqsimi is an intranasal spray, and the Gvoke is a pre-filled syringe. So it's still a syringe, but now families or parent or school health staff or teachers that are on field trips don't have to, you know, fiddle around with pulling medication out of a vial and mixing it and so on. And we're absolutely encouraging families, when we get that glucagon traditional kit, we're encouraging them next time they meet with their provider to get the prescription for either the Baqsimi or the Gvoke, and we are seeing a lot more of those in the schools.
Thank you so much. Yes, so things are changing so quickly, and it's really a wonderful thing for people with diabetes and families, as well as our school nurses. So, you know, we're almost at the top of the hour. I want to go around with our panelists and get each of you to give your one last best tip for school nurses caring for and supporting students with diabetes. We're going to round robin it. So we're going to start with who's at the top of my screen, and that's Jackie. So what's your one best tip?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. I would say, and we've echoed it a lot, it's just that collaborative piece. So as the school nurse, you know, you're kind of seen as the leader to help with getting these students what they need in school and providing that training. So you're the ultimate advocate, and you're seen as that resource for your student. And so we appreciate that and recognize that that can be a hard task, but you're seen as that sole person there in the school for your kids. So collaborate away.
All right, Carrie, what about you?
I think I would say patience with yourself, patience with your families, patience with your students. This is a big chronic condition that takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, a lot of work, a lot of keeping up with what's new out there in technology. And so just having patience with yourself, and also realizing there is a multitude of resources to help you work through different situations, different challenges, different devices, all of that is out there. You know, while you're thought of as the expert and you are the expert, there are resources and people there to help you through the different things that come up.
Corey, what is your best tip? Oh, Corey, we can't hear you.
So sorry. I love the previous two comments for sure. In addition to collaboration, I think the word that comes to mind for me is just communication. I feel like the more communication we all have working with these students, the better things go. And sometimes that requires a lot. I get a lot of my communication is through texting. So thank goodness for cell phones. But it really matters. I think parents feel so much more confident in the care that their students have if you communicate with the parents, with the teachers, with the students, with their classmates, with the cafeteria. It just goes on and on.
Wonderful. Sandy.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say communication too, but I think on top of that too, just being flexible and really being flexible with the family. You know, everyone's doing their best here. And I think we're ultimately concerned about the safety and well-being of that student, and realizing if parents want us to do something that's not based on the DMMP, just having that open conversation that we can't do this because we have to follow the DMMP, and we'll be as flexible as possible. But hey, let's connect with your doctor and get some updates if needed. So just really being flexible and understanding that everyone's doing the best they can.
Erica, what about you?
I keep thinking about learning and being a lifelong learner. We've acknowledged that the technology is always changing, but I think we often come from a hospital medical setting into this education world and quickly have to become the expert of everything. So continuing to learn on 504 law, on the newer trends in management of diabetes, and in everything regarding this, be prepared that you have to be the expert on scene. And if you don't know the answer, know some ways to reach out to find the answer. And then just be open to learning, whether it's through conferences or online webinars, or reaching out to the American Diabetes Association network.
Annie, you're in the unenviable position of last. Everybody's given such great tips. What do you have to round us out?
It's okay. I was going to say positive intent. Yes. Most people are, if they don't know the answer and they're asking questions, it doesn't mean that they're trying to be argumentative. We really do all understand that diabetes is complex and it's relentless. And it's sometimes you just want like a break from it, and we get it. And so if we don't understand something, or we don't, see the bigger picture from what you're seeing, just know that our questions and wanting to help is in a positive light. And I know that you guys mean that too. So when parents come to us grouchy, it's important for nurses to also be like, okay, hold on, we deal with it at school. These people are dealing with it at night and on weddings and on birthdays. And when somebody has the flu and all those things, and it goes on, and it's hard. And so we're all trying to do our best.
What beautiful tips. Thank you to each of you. The American Diabetes Association is so grateful for your advocacy and your support of students with diabetes and their families and caregivers. And I personally am so incredibly grateful for all of the efforts that you do as an adult now living with type 1 diabetes. Thank you to everybody who's attended this important back to school session. We've been delighted to put this out for you. We hope the guidance and information provided today has been helpful to you as we all prepare to send students back to school. So please know that the American Diabetes Association is here for you. A link to this session will soon be available on the ADA's website and various social media platforms if you'd like to view it again or share it with others. Our number one goal is keeping students with diabetes safe and preparing them for their future. For more information, visit Safe at School. Go to diabetes.org/safe-at-school or call 1-800-DIABETES. And you can also email askada@diabetes.org. That's how you get more information on this Safe at School program. So once again, thank you for attending this very important webinar, and hooray for back to school.